Hello there. Glad you could join us on another episode of Down the Donut Hole podcast. And I don't know. There's a lot of stuff. We haven't talked about news in a while. That's a good thing.
Yes, it's very nice to kind of just leave the nervous news off to the periphery for a bit. Yesterday we had fun talking about Kelly, about the birds in the window. Last Friday, which was the last previous podcast, we talked about ghosts. So we had our freaky podcast, which is always a lot of fun.
Or the phenomenon that might explain the ghosts.
Yeah. But we're not
But the
done
ghosts
talking.
say, wait a minute, you don't know anything about what our deal is.
I'll show you, buddy.
That's right.
Watch out. Usually we try to get back to the nervous news on Mondays, but I just couldn't handle that yesterday.
For me, it's more like trying to avoid it. But,
Yeah.
you know.
No, it is. I think people are trying to avoid it. But as we say, we're trying to achieve balance, and balance does not mean sticking your head in the sand. What it means is confronting those things, take them apart so that you understand the gist of it and what it means in terms of our constitutional guarantees, our democracy. We do not be sidetracked by political affiliation. Our gauge is the Constitution of the United States. And so we have to keep that fully in focus because it's too easy to let team alliance, party alliance, guide you on a path that maybe you really are not 100% sold on. So if our guiding star is the Constitution and the guarantees as a democracy, then I think we can't go too far wrong. And we can all agree on that. That's something that gives me a great deal of comfort because that's what we stand up for. And as soon as these alliances, these affiliations begin to be seen for what they really are, and how dangerous they are because they do foment division, then I think it'll be a lot easier for us to get back on track. Constitution, everybody, that's where we're going. And so I think that today it's unavoidable. We have to get back, have a look, take a peek at the nervous news, and then try to figure out how we can find that balance again that keeps us strong, it keeps us healthy, and it keeps us able to confront things that are very nerve-wracking in a sensible
And as
way.
always, make sure that you research several sources, not
Yes.
just the ones that
Yes.
are easy to find. Sometimes you do have to dig a bit.
I try to. When doing a daily podcast, and it's really just us doing the research on it. So I try to devote as much time as I have available to me to kind of look at other sources and try to find, some basis that we can talk about things that isn't mainstream news or that's kind of digested from a bunch of news sources. But that's not just my responsibility. That's everyone's individual responsibility. And whether you like the tenor of other newscasts, you've got to go and check them out because not everything a newscast is telling you is wrong or partisan skewed. So get your news from a bunch of different places, synthesize what you're hearing, and come up with your own understanding of what it is as an independent person because you need to keep that independence. That's yours. That is what makes you powerful, not affiliation with the one group or the other, or because the group you're affiliated with generally is in power right now. That's not enough. You have individual power, and that's guaranteed to you, but you have to exercise it. That means voting. That also means doing your own homework. So that's where we're at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always a good idea.
And
you have an example, actually, when you watch I think some are worse than others, but the evening news from the three major networks on TV. And you kind of get an example of that because some of them, like I say, are worse than others in this regard, but they'll have at the very beginning, there'll be breaking news. And I'm thinking, is there really breaking news like every day? Maybe there is lately, but then when they actually get to the story, Oh, was that it? I mean, why did you say it in such an urgent way? Because it's really not exactly the way they presented it in the
we have
tease
to remember
at the beginning
something.
of the show.
Those are businesses. Yes, they're providing a journalistic service to us, keeping us abreast of the news, but they are in competition with each other. They are businesses. They need to capture the attention of the audience and hold that attention. And so if they create a sense of urgency every single day, for one thing, it's not good for us as consumers because we're always in a state of fight or flight. And so we need to take control of that and just sit and listen for a little bit and see if it's worthy of the sense of emergency. And, then figure it out for yourself. But they are businesses. It's just like the old days when newspapers were sold on the street. They were always trying to scoop each other. They were always to come out with the most eye-catching headlines that they could because that grabs viewership, and that means money because they are advertiser supported. So keeping in mind who we're talking about, and can we do without those outlets? Absolutely not. But it's up to us to create our own balance. And that's what this podcast is all about. Down the donut hole really means filling in that gap. And that gap is your power. That's where your strength comes from, is owning that. That is yours. Nobody can take it from you. State your opinion. Be sure of your facts. At the very most, the best that you can do in the moment. And listen. Do a lot of listening, because that will help inform your sum total understanding of what's happening. Now, this morning, I have bad news for everybody. If anybody within hearing of this podcast thought that the United States was going to gain a 51st state in our neighbors to the north, I have news. It ain't happening anytime soon. Yesterday, Canadian elections were held, and the Liberal Party won decidedly, or at least when I got my data, it appeared that way. They were still 4 votes short of a majority because at that point they stopped counting votes and they were going to wait until this morning to finish the count. But it looked pretty insurmountable, and so pretty much we can say...
Wait a minute. 4 votes is not insurmountable. That's what it sounds like. It was that close.
No. 4 votes from this huge majority that they already had, because they came from like 35 points down just 5 months ago, the Liberal Party in Canada. So they were a decided underdog, but as of late last night, and I haven't had a chance to look too much more now, but it looks like... And what was interesting is there was, I believe, unprecedented unity between the Liberal Party and the Conservatives in Canada, because in the concession speech, the Conservative leader said, oh, and by the way, we will not become the 51st state. So they were both in agreement. They don't want to be the 51st state of the United States. And at this point, I can't blame them. I like having neighbors to the north who are independent, who have a different worldview.
Well, did the U.S. do any campaigning up there to try to convince them?
No, but oh my goodness, listen to this. Our President Trump suggested that they should elect him. Now get that.
Well, they wouldn't have to if they did just join the USA. They'd have them by default.
No, he suggested that the Canadians should elect him. And he said that he had the strength, he personally has the strength and wisdom to cut taxes in half, to increase military power for free to the highest in the world, and that they could have car, steel, aluminum, lumber, energy, and other businesses quadruple, and 0 tariffs or taxes if they elect him, Donald J. Trump, as their prime minister in Canada. And He was serious. Now, Canada has
If he can
60
do all that stuff, why hasn't he done it here?
Well, he said he was gonna. Any day now, all of these things are going to be addressed. So Canada has 16 parties. Did you know that?
They do. No, I didn't.
Green, Libertarian, a party called the Union Party,
Well, yeah,
Canadian
I mean,
Future.
we kind of had here, through the years, but they were just very, very small variations of a different one.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
not anymore. I mean, you don't really see that as much anymore here.
Even though the Conservative Party, who lost the election, said that Donald Trump should stay out of our elections, meaning Canadian elections. So that's kind of big. You can credit President Trump for having united two of the biggest parties in Canada.
Where was Mr. Musk in all this? He could have offered them some cash, maybe.
Yeah, 200.
Every citizen, I'm going to give you,
Well, he's not
a
afraid
lot
to
of
do
money.
that here, and he's gotten away with it. And he invested $277 million in President Trump's election campaign. And people are saying, wow, Mr. Musk certainly got his money's worth out of that. And a lot of it came at the expense of Tesla, which has had a horrible first quarter. I mean, decidedly a horrible first quarter. And Tesla's struggles, I'll put it that way, are not indicative of the industry as a whole, of the auto industry as a whole.
It seems more like a correction, really, because they've been so overvalued. I think,
Yeah, to some extent, that's probably
that's
true.
kind of down where it should be.
But I think generally, and again, this is a unifier for both parties, both main parties in the United States. Nobody's loving that. And even some of the appointees that President Trump has put as the secretaries of the big departments in our government, they're not sure what to do with this Doge, Mr. Musk incursions into their jurisdictions. I mean, he's issuing edicts and things like that and going into their deep computer systems, and nobody knows what this is about. What are you supposed to do with that if you've been elected to head something up, and then this unelected individual that nobody's quite certain what this is supposed to be is in there, and sometimes in contradiction with what you'd like to see happen within
He's
your own
ready to
agency.
leave anyway, isn't he? According to the original timeline.
Yes, I believe he was only supposed to be in there 100 and, I forget, 17 days, something like that. And that he said again that he'll be heading back over to Tesla. So enjoy, Tesla. I hope the new chainsaw is still working. But I know that the job cuts as a result of Doge's efforts in our government. I mean, 83,000 personnel in the Veterans Affairs, gone. And you know how you and I are both on Social Security? You know how it helps so much if you have customer service and you get somebody on the phone and the wait isn't all day long like it used to be. Remember when we would sit there? We would have to take turns sitting there waiting for an answer to a call. Meanwhile, you're
Well,
on
you still
hold.
get that, but there are some that have improved.
That was we were in New York State at the time, and that was just so difficult to manage because who has that kind of time to just sit there? We'd have to put on the speakerphone and listen to the elevator music, and then, if either of us had something else to do, we'd spell each other off so that we could keep track of what was happening on the phone. But so customer service helps if you've laid off or axed 83,000 people in Veterans Administration. We're not veterans, by the way. I should clarify that.
Well, we're veterans of something.
Life.
And I can't-
we got the tracks to show it.
Yeah,
But
true.
I think, I don't know. I know that a lot of these firings have had to be reinstated because it was done not to protocol. And I just wonder, is somebody keeping track of how much it costs us as a country to axe people. Then they're on layoff for a while, and the work isn't getting done, and things that need to be followed up on are just in limbo. And then you have to defend a lawsuit as a country. The agencies have to defend a lawsuit, and then the people have to be reinstated. Now, to me, I know, absolutely I know, that ain't free. That kind of stuff costs money. And anytime you engage lawyers for the courts or to defend yourself or to launch a suit of any kind, you're talking money. You're talking bucks. So I'd love to see what the running tab looks like for all of these lawsuits, because a lot of the cuts were with funds or for projects that the funding was already appropriated by Congress. It had already been approved. It had been promised. Decisions were made by schools, by agencies, across the world. And then by rescinding that funding, it has just hit like a hailstorm on people. And the downstream is devastating and will take a long time to recover from. So who's keeping tabs? And I do mean tabs on how much all of this is costing.
Yeah. Well, they can just walk over to a computer terminal somewhere and type in some more numbers.
I wish I could chuckle. I can't, because it is true. Mm-hmm. And I think when President Trump was running, the suggestion was, or the understanding, I think for most people, was that that's what we were going to be looking at. We're not going to just keep printing money. We're going to go through this stuff finally. We're going to understand how everything interconnects. We'll decide what's necessary, what we can let go of, what we can consolidate, and then we'll move forward with a much more streamlined mentality than we've had to date, where we're just writing checks to fix stuff.
One of the things that I did applaud the president about is this call to visit Fort Knox again, because it's been a lot of years. I haven't heard anything about that lately.
I know. I haven't heard a thing. Did they go there?
I don't think so.
We don't know, do we? We know that they were headed there, but we don't know. And it's this spin of uncertainty that helps to generate those anxious feelings that we're all concerned about. And it isn't just Democrats, Republicans as well. I think everybody had a different concept, and with all good intent, thinking that this was going to result in a fairly quick turnaround on the inflationary pricing, that some people are still suggesting that it has to do with residuals from the pandemic in 2020, that supply chains were weakened and businesses in critical positions had gone out of business. And so we kind of had the sense that, okay, we're still mopping up from that. And you kind of can figure, okay, I kind of get it. But the sense was that he was going to really have a serious look at that under the microscope and fix it. And now we're 100 days in. We're over 100 days, I think. And things are worse than ever when you go out there. Now with all the tariffs, people are worried about, hey, I've got to get my kid new stuff to go back to school. Christmas follows quickly on the heels of that.
The kids say, hey, we're not even out yet. Don't tell us about going back.
I know. Do you remember that? How wonderful this time of year was. After Easter, after the spring break, it seemed like the school year went by really quickly. I always loved that.
Maybe for you.
Oh, for me, it just seemed to fly by.
One of those. You started out bringing apples, didn't you?
No. No, if there was any apples, I ate them. But anyway, so these are all concerns. We don't need a 51st state. We're having trouble keeping track of the ones we have. Mm-hmm. I saw...
I like the lady, I don't know what her title is or whatever, but she was putting out their counteroffer to California and some of the Northwest states to say, hey, how about this? Here's what you get. You get universal health care. You get,
I heard that. I did like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's
She's
never a
great,
good
yeah.
idea to be fighting with your nearest neighbors. I don't think. It's always nice to know that you have each other's back, and if there's a shortfall or an emergency, that they can count on you and you can count on them.
Right, really. I mean, it's the world's longest border between two countries, isn't it? That's not guarded
Oh, yeah.
for most of it.
Yeah, I mean, there are border checkpoints.
Well, yeah,
and
of
things
course,
like that.
there. But
I mean, in Vermont, isn't there a library that you can enter from the Canadian side through one door?
something like that. Yeah.
And you can exit
There's a
to
little,
another door in the States.
There's a little customs guy there and everything.
Yeah, on both sides, which I think is cool. But I think they've both kind of contributed funds to keeping this going, and they co-op on cultural events from this little library. And I just love that idea. I think, how charming is that? In fact, if I ever get to Vermont, I'd love to visit
Well, we
that.
did. We did.
We
remember?
did,
We
long-
looked at
long
some
ago, but
property
I
way,
didn't
way
know
back.
about this.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
it turned out to be halfway up a mountain or something. But when we looked at the map later, we said, gee whiz, we could probably walk into Canada from here.
I know, we were looking for property at that time. And I'm glad we didn't do that, because now that I've been down in
hard to get
Florida
to.
in the winter, it's a little hard for me, especially of our age, to get my head around, the shoveling and all of that stuff. I mean, we have our weather challenges. For me, it's the horrible humidity and the really high
Yeah,
heat.
that's
I
the
don't
real
do
problem.
well with that. But just like up north, you can hole up with your air conditioner on, the opposite of the furnace, and, do quiet chores that don't require a whole bunch of movement, and you'll be all right. So that. Now, here's another piece.
Oh, boy, here we go.
Here's another piece of nervous news. We lost a $60 million fighter jet. It apparently...
70, I think.
Yeah, I heard 70.
And the tow truck.
And that went too.
Yeah.
They were towing an aircraft carrier, or not a carrier, an aircraft, a fighter jet. On the aircraft carrier, the Truman, USS Harry Truman. And something went wrong. It zigged when it should have zagged. And the whole thing skidded off into the Red Sea. And it's not broken up or anything. It didn't get shot down. I know that there was one of those jets, I think the same kind, that was shot down in 2022 in the Red Sea. And it took them 37 days, but they were able to recover that. This, they're saying there's a lot of problems with the concept of trying to recover this jet, which I think you damn well better get that out of there. Because this would be up for grabs for anybody that could pull off the mission to pull it out of there. Now, here's what I found out, because I thought, okay, how deep is that water? Because they said that it would be difficult to extract. And it's, in a lot of places, not that deep, The average depth, I think, the maximum depth is almost 10,000 feet. But 40% of the Red Sea is about 330 feet. And then 25% of the Red Sea is less than 160 feet. Yeah. So we can say 65% is less than 330 feet.
All right, so an aircraft carrier, which weighs God knows what, they'd have to be over the deeper water. They couldn't go to... maybe, I don't know.
Okay, so let's say 10,000 feet. Let's say that.
Well, 300 anyway. But again, I don't know. I'm no expert, that's for sure.
No. Anyway, I just really feel like they need to get that out of there. But they say one of the factors about whether they can do that is the risk of attack. Now, the Harry S. Truman has been attacked regularly with
where
drones.
Are they? What do they think they're doing with no problems? They're
No,
risk of
they're-
attack anyway.
Oh, every day.
Yeah.
Every day. Now, about 12% of our shipping that pertains to us passes through the Red Sea and then ultimately through the Suez Canal. So that's the link. It's a shortcut. Europe benefits greatly from it. A good deal of container traffic goes through the Suez Canal from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. And so we do have some skin in the game with that. I know that when Secretary Hegseth was on his initial, signal call,
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. The app.
the app, that he was kind of grumbling about the fact that this wasn't so much about the U.S. Now, I do know that the Houthis are kind of not more than kind of, they're very much about protecting Hamas in that area. And so I'm wondering if that's not the reason why we're there, to kind of act as an antidote a little bit to that whole thing. I don't know. I don't pretend to know. But I do know that we've got now, I'll say $65 million worth of aircraft down in the bottom of that sea. And I think we need to get that out of there.
Yeah. Not
So-
anytime soon, I'm sure.
No, but it makes our Defense Department appear like the Keystone Cops.
A little bit, yeah.
Now, this morning I saw that this happened as they were trying to evade a Houthi attack. Now, who's towing aircrafts if you're trying to dodge some sort of an attack? It would seem like, that's ill-timed, or how did you not know? And so I think...
Well, it may be possible that they, were anticipating the need for the plane to take the air and moving it from its quote-unquote hangar area. I don't know. But again, no expertise here at all, but they do have safety lines attached to those, which are just short enough to prevent something like that from happening. So I don't know what the deal was there, but possibly.
I don't know. I just know that's really unacceptable. And
It does seem like there's a fair amount of that happens.
yeah, friendly fire. That the shooting down of the plane in 2022 was by friendly fire. And I think in the confusion of all of this, we've gotten so dependent on computers for this and computers for that, that it seems like it can go wrong very quickly, almost really inadvertently. I know even on my computer, and I've said it so many times, I know it's boring, but that you can goof things up pretty seriously with just the push of one button. So that it's not good news.
No, it's not all that surprising, really.
No. All right. President Trump's approval ratings are really, really taking a serious dip because of all of this, because of the efforts of DOGE, because of all the funding cuts. I know a lot of the farmers across America were counting on subsidies, and a lot of them were selling crops to these U.S. aid agencies. And so now, without that being a possibility, everybody's reeling. And they're waiting. I think everybody has the sense, okay, this is feeling really scary to me. Tell me something good. Tell me what you're going to do to replace this for me, because this is how we've been operating for a long time. And while it hasn't been perfect, it's better than zero. And so that is a huge concern for farmers. I know all of these DEI cuts have left people shocked, frankly. And I know the justification is that they want no race or gender considerations in the American government. Now, from an idealistic point of view, that makes good sense. We're all equal. Theoretically, we're all equal. It should be,
Are we really, though?
We're not. I don't believe we are, Dave. I really don't. And as a
clearly.
female, I can tell you, I don't feel
We talked about that on another show.
a lot of other shows, especially when we were talking about the Iroquois Confederacy and how that's matrilineal. And then we kind of morphed into conversations about gender equality in this country and all of that. But I will say that those initiatives were put in place because it didn't take any expert to realize that it was very tipped in favor of white males. And those initiatives were to add a little bit of diversity to publicly funded initiatives. And yes, if they're doing that, then you have to say, well, maybe we didn't get the best person for the job, but maybe you did. Maybe the best person did get put in there because they finally got a chance. And I know if you look big picture in this country, certainly, the insurance industry recognizes that, and this will come as a shock to a lot of people who've made a lot of jokes about women drivers, but they're very good drivers.
Oh yeah, they're better. Mm-hmm.
They're excellent drivers, and without all of the bravado, that kind of goes along with being a young male, they drive.
The statistics are clear on women being better health practitioners, doctors, and such.
Is that right?
Much better outcomes.
In what way?
You mean they have a better percentage of success, if you want to look at it that way, with whatever the medical treatment is required for any particular malady.
I wonder why.
Because they're nurturers by nature.
Is that sexist to say that?
Sure, but you can be sexist in a positive way. They're caretakers by nature, and I think that's why. They put some more care, some sort of emotion, more along the line of mothering.
Do you think they listen more?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Do you think they ask more questions about other aspects, more holistic approach than the average male does?
Yeah, that's
this is
just
really
my
a
gut.
generalization.
Very much so. I mean, there are statistics out there, and I don't know them in front of me, but I have read many studies about that, how the general outcomes for women practitioners in the healthcare field are much higher than for men.
Do you think it's easier for patients, males, even more so maybe than females, to relax with a female doctor? Because you're used to a relationship with your mom. I mean, unless she's like Marilyn Monroe or somebody.
Yeah, that's right. From a male perspective, yeah. It would depend on what the procedure was going to entail and what area of your body was involved.
Yeah, but it works that same way for females.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when the field was mostly males...
Especially GYN. I mean, how did you feel about that? Would you rather have a female doctor in those situations? It would seem like.
With my first baby and all of that, I was a little bit uncomfortable, but I reasoned very, very quickly. I want a person who is well studied in this, and I don't care if you're a Martian, and especially when you're about to give birth. I was so worried about that. I thought, it's going to be so uncomfortable. And I mean, in an awkward way, not in a pain way. And then when it was actually happening, somebody had said to me, you know what, when it's actually happening, you'd give birth at Grand Central Station and you won't care because it's all operations go. Mm-hmm. Your brain kicks in to birth mode, and, and it happens. And there's nothing you can do really to hold it back. And I think that was a good piece of advice. And it certainly, I have to say, I agree with that. So after you get used to the idea of this is a doctor, let's just take all the other identifiers out of this and focus on the professionalism. And for the most part, I think you can do that. I mean, now you hear about these little situations about medical professionals who are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, but for the most part, I think people do well. So I'm happy with that. These initiatives, now I saw that, and I don't have the specifics, but I saw that they've removed now, by executive order, some guidelines that prevented lenders from any sort of bias against female applicants for loans, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we're not all that long away from the time when a female applicant for a loan would have to get a male cosigner. And that, when you think about that, I mean, certainly for me as a female, that is just so insulting. Mm-hmm. And so now,
about not having the right to vote, for gosh sakes,
Yeah. And that it hasn't been that long that we've had that.
It's modern. It was a modern era for sure.
Well, now by executive order, those protections have been removed in the last day or two. Mm-hmm. So now there can be bias, implicit or not, unconscious bias against female applicants. It's just mind-boggling. We work so hard to get those protections, those guardrails, those safeguards. Mm-hmm. But again, the government is consistent. We do not want any reference to gender, to color. I never hear anything about age. Do you? We should be listening.
But they are one of the most discriminated groups that there is. Old people.
Yeah.
Definitely. But we talked again on a previous podcast about that, the DEI thing. I think that was the title of the episode, actually, about how, because in the U.S., the statistics between ethnicity in the U.S. keeps changing, something like 40%, 60% white. And, of course, from that statistics, half of that are female. Mm-hmm. So the abolition, I'll say, of DEI initiatives are benefiting only 30% of the population of the United States. And that's white men.
You have to figure, among the population of white men, I am absolutely certain there are some with enough courage and conscience to disapprove of that.
Like me.
Yeah, like you. I'm sure that there are many people like you who see that as something that is not desirable. But why is this not being heard? Can we assume that people aren't showing up to the polls?
I mean, there's been good turnouts for sure, but there's other factors. I don't know if we have time to get into that right now. We touched on it previously, but that people are voting, but a lot of them are voting against their own best self-interest for other reasons, and maybe we'll do another episode about that.
Well, I think in the generic, a lot of people have felt disenfranchised. I think a lot of people feel that government isn't working for them. Certainly, Bernie has pointed that out, that the government over the last good while has been benefiting the 1%, the very, very top.
I heard you listening to Bernie this morning, actually.
I was.
What was that?
It's
Something new?
Well, he and AOC have been crisscrossing the country, holding rallies. And Dave, they are massively well attended. And I have to admire him because as an independent, you can listen to him and you can think, he is calling it as he sees it. He's not beholden to either party. And AOC, along with him, I know she's a lightning rod. She gets an awful lot of backlash. People like to roll their eyes. You see it in comedy routines and things like that. They like to roll their eyes at Bernie because he stays 100% on message. He's been telling us this for a long time. But now, all you have to do is tune in to any newscast or any vision of what's happening in the Oval Office, and you see a contingent of billionaires in there. And you think to yourself, wow, these are not my peers. Who are these people? Why are they there? What's he promising them? How much did it cost him to cost those billionaires to come through the door? And it stinks. It looks like pay to play, and that's troubling if you try to analyze it at all.
It's the way it's been for a very long time.
Oh, but now it's in your face, So now people can believe Bernie because they can see it with their own eyes. This isn't kind of in the back room or hidden or something you have to extrapolate from headlines. This is right there for everybody to see if you open your eyes. So, anyway, they've had great success. They're going to continue that stop or fight against oligarchy, something like that. And I think it's well worthy. These continuous protests all the time, hands off, no kings. Every single weekend, there's tons of protests. And the consensus is that Washington, the Oval Office in particular, is beginning to notice that this doesn't seem to be diminishing or doesn't appear to be going away anytime soon. And so certain behavior modifications are going to have to happen because the public is increasingly unhappy about it. I mean, even among Republicans, all of these DOGE cuts and that, a lot of Republican constituents are saying, this is not what I voted for. This is too indiscriminate. It's too fast. It's too much. It doesn't seem thought out. There's reversal after reversal. And like I say, that ain't free. So you could say you're saving a bunch of money with these chops, but if it's costing, millions to reinstate people and to fix what you broke on purpose, then we have a lot of worries. Furthermore, we don't know what has been taken out of those government computers and who has it now, who has access to that. We do not know. And that is scary. And our standing in the world with all of these tariffs taking, aim at friend and foe alike, or friend and, I should say, competitors alike, that does not give people a peaceful, easy feeling. And so in red states, traditionally red states, President Trump's approval rating is down, but, not so much as in traditionally blue states, and swing states are also kind of moving away from Trump fever. And so if things don't turn around, if the public doesn't feel like they're back on solid ground, then that will continue to happen. I do know Mr. Musk's exit from the Oval Office may improve things immediately, just because the optics of that have gotten just off-putting completely to people, even with a casual look. So we have all of that. So we'll see how it goes. Again, keep balance in your life. Mm-hmm. Do something that makes you happy. Learn to do your meditative breathing.
Taking the news only up until the point where you really feel it making you nervous, physically, and then say, hey, you know what? We've had real rough times in our past history for generations, and, we're still here.
Well, I do think we have never had anything in our own inner circle that it can be directly correlated to this. And I will say, when we tell you to do your homework for yourself, that does take time. So maybe you're involved in researching the nervous news more than you would really care to, but that's where we're at. Anyway, we are out of time.
Okay.
And so we use
Probably
this.
just as well.
Now, tomorrow we'll try to find something a little bit lighter or at least split up the nervous news because who knows? The news is coming at us fast and furious. Count your blessings. Start there. It'll make you feel better. And you will be surprised how many you really have. But don't look for just big things. Count the little ones too.
Absolutely.
Bye now.
Next time.